Hey guys, tonight we're traveling way back to a land of mud brick cities, sandal scuff marks, and so many goats. It's honestly surprising anyone ever got anything done. You find yourself in ancient Mesopotamia, nestled somewhere between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where the sun already feels like it's had 3 espressos before you've even wiped the sleep from your eyes. In this world, the concept of checking the time doesn't involve a smartwatch or even a sundial. Nope. Here, time drips, literally, out of a tiny hole in the bottom of a bowl. Welcome to the soothingly slow art of water clocks. You're about to spend a drowsy day wandering around with temple priests, sleepy scribes, and the occasional suspicious goat, all trying to figure out how to mark time without digital numbers or alarms. Now, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Mesopotamian time optional. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to the soft murmur of reeds swaying beside a canal, the distant bleating of sheep, and the unmistakable slosh of water being poured. It's morning in Ur or maybe Lagash. You're not entirely sure because, well, they haven't invented street signs yet. But what they do have is timekeeping. Kind of. You blink as a group of robed priests shuffles past, carefully cradling bowls of water like fragile treasures. One mutters something about third division of daylight. Another checks the shadow under a fig tree. You trail them to the courtyard of a ziggurat, where rows of shallow copper vessels shimmer in the heat. Some are half full. Others are crusted with ancient mineral buildup. All of them apparently tell time. Sort of. The basic idea is this. You poke a tiny hole in the bottom of a bowl, fill it with water, and let it drain. When the water's gone, time's up. That's it. No gears, no bells, just gravity, patience, and the occasional mosquito. The official name for this kind of device is a clepsydra, though you probably won't hear anyone around here call it that. They just nod at the bowls and say, "Yes, the sacred hourglass," without sand. You watch as one of the older priests, a man with a beard so dense it might qualify as a separate person, gently taps a bowl to clear a tiny bubble near the hole. "You must release the water spirit," he mumbles. Whether he's joking or just really tired, you can't tell. Nobody's had coffee yet. According to scholars, and that one tablet half buried in a museum basement, these early water clocks weren't just gadgets, they were tools of cosmic alignment, used to coordinate temple rituals, schedule offerings, and impress visiting dignitaries with how civilized the locals were. And while these bowls might look basic, their usage was anything but. You glance to your left and see a younger scribe scratching cuneiform into a clay tablet. He's logging the drain times of 3 different bowls, nodding with intense focus. One bowl, shaped like a shallow bell, drains in precisely 14 minutes. Another, rounder with a longer taper, clocks in at 17.5. And the third, an experimental conical model, dribbles like a confused toddler. The scribe frowns and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "Great." Another lopsided hour. Historians still argue whether these early clepsydras were standardized or completely random. Some claim the Mesopotamians had measurement systems based on water volume. Others suggest they eyeballed it and trusted the gods to fill in the gaps. One tablet even hints at regional competitions. Which city can count a day the best? Spoiler, nobody wins. Of course, time in ancient Mesopotamia doesn't move in 24 neat hours. Their calendars blend lunar cycles, temple rites, and agricultural necessities into a slow, syrupy stew. So, one water clock might be meant to mark a prayer interval, another a marketplace shift, and a third, well, maybe just a reminder to flip your lentil stew before it burns. But as you shuffle through the dusty courtyard, yawning alongside the bleeding goats, one thing becomes clear. Despite the rudimentary setup, there's a deeply human rhythm pulsing beneath these water clocks. A need to anchor the day. a desire to organize the chaos of sun, flood, and famine into manageable drips. And just when you're about to lie down for a quick nap in the shade of a worn pillar, you overhear a hushed conversation. Two priests arguing softly about whether the water is evaporating too quickly in today's heat. If the bowl empties too fast, the sacrifice will be early, one says. Better early than cursed, replies the other. You smile. It turns out even 4,000 years ago, people still panicked over running late. Your eyes start to close, lulled by the rhythmic plinking of droplets hitting the basin. It's the original white noise machine, courtesy of civilization's earliest clockmakers. And even though you've only just begun your Mesopotamian journey, you already feel the hours slipping gently away. One drop at a time, you're sitting cross-legged now, your fingers tracing the edge of a cool bronze basin. The metal is dented, smoothed by centuries of calloused hands and sacred water rituals. Somewhere nearby, a temple singer hums a scale under her breath, practicing for a ceremony that will begin when, according to that dripping bowl over there, the fourth segment of daylight begins. Or is it the fifth? It's a little unclear. What is clear, however, is that the gods are involved. Very involved. You glance up at a towering wall relief, its figures worn smooth by sun and sand. Enki, the god of water and knowledge, holds a flowing vessel in each hand. The streams tumble down toward tiny carved humans, who raise their arms in awe. It's not just an artistic flourish. This is theology. To the ancient Mesopotamians, water isn't just hydration. It's time itself, pouring from the divine into the daily. You shuffle closer to a group of young students squatting in the dust while an elder speaks. He points to the wall and then to one of the dripping bowls nearby. Enki gives the flow, he says. Our job is to listen. And you do listen. To the hush of water, to the squawk of a distant ibis, to the soft thud of someone stumbling into a clay pot again. That happens a lot here. This sacred worldview, where time flows like a river, shapes everything. Rituals start when enough drops fall. Sleep ends when the bowl empties. It's the original alarm clock, but with more sacred chanting and fewer snooze buttons. The origin myths go further. Some tablets claim the gods invented timekeeping to maintain cosmic order. So men would not forget the gods, one line reads. Another slightly snarkier version claims the gods made time so humans would stop bothering them all day. Because apparently even deities need a break. Historians still debate whether these myths were symbolic or used as teaching tools for young apprentices. Some argue that the myth of Enki pouring time onto the earth was just a poetic way to explain how water clocks worked. Others think the people truly believed time was literal water, blessed by divine hands. You watch as a high priestess approaches the main ziggurat, her robes trailing over the sandstone steps. She carries a jug filled from the temple's sacred pool, water that's been filtered through reeds, clay pots, and several rounds of whispered blessings. The whole thing is quite dramatic, and yet deeply sleepy. Everything moves at the pace of ceremony, which is to say, slowly, deliberately, and with lots of long pauses to emphasize things. You follow her up the stairs, step by slow step, pausing as she pours a measured amount of water into the largest bowl you've seen yet. It gleams in the morning light, set into a pedestal etched with symbols for sun, life, and counting. She whispers, "Let the gods observe the flow," and steps back. Nothing else happens. The bowl drips. That's it. You wait. It's peaceful. Even a little hypnotic. If you had a pillow, you'd lie down right here. Then, out of nowhere, a younger priest panics. Someone started the ritual bowl too early. This bowl was supposed to mark the midpoint of the day, and now, thanks to a premature pour, the barley offering might hit the altar 10 minutes ahead of schedule. You'd think the world was ending. People mumble, gestures are made toward the sky. A goat bleats in protest. Eventually, someone mutters, "It's fine, Enki will understand." And everyone relaxes. Sort of. You step back down and find yourself wandering through a quieter street lined with workshops. A potter grunts as he shapes clay, and a metal worker wipes sweat from his brow. You notice something interesting. Each craftsman seems to have their own version of a water clock. Tiny ones, makeshift, carved from gourds or old bowls. These are personal clepsydras, not temple grade, but functional. One even has scratches on the side marking intervals like little tally marks. It dawns on you. This isn't just sacred, it's practical. People use these clocks to pace their tasks. Boil the dye for this long, let the bread rise for that long. Allow your apprentice exactly 3 drips worth of rest before yelling at him again. And still this world feels timeless. No ticking, no urgency, just water, gravity, and the slow crawl of shadow across brick walls. You sit beside a baker's stall and notice her water bowl has a small float, a bit of papyrus leaf so she can tell at a glance when the water's halfway down. Clever. Probably invented by someone who was late to temple one too many times. As the sun shifts higher, the bowls start emptying more quickly. The heat evaporates the water faster, which causes an entirely new problem. Clocks that aren't trustworthy. You overhear 2 market vendors arguing. "My bowl says it's the 6th part," one insists. "Yours is cracked," the other retorts. Some scholars believe this is why water clocks were rarely used in outdoor markets, too unreliable in the desert sun. Others say it didn't matter because everyone just agreed to be slightly wrong together, which, honestly, is the most relatable part of the whole system. You take one more long look at the dripping bowl on the ziggurat platform. Its shadow lengthens. The rhythm continues. One drop. Another. Then another. Like ancient lullabies in liquid form. The heat has mellowed into a dusty golden warmth as you shuffle into a narrow passage between 2 sun-baked walls. A shallow trickle of runoff snakes past your sandals. Residual water from one of the nearby temple cisterns. You follow it lazily to a small shaded courtyard where something different catches your eye. A collection of bowls, spoons, and what appears to be a hollow reed mounted above a clay dish. A young apprentice hovers over it, squinting with the intense concentration of someone trying not to spill soup on a sacred relic. You crouch down beside him. He glances at you, then back to the setup and whispers, "This one drips on purpose." You blink. Of course it does. That's the point, isn't it? He clarifies. But this one, he points to the reed, was made to drip at exact intervals. If I cut the hole too wide, the day ends too soon. Too narrow, and the gods wait in silence. He grins awkwardly. They don't like silence. You nod like you understand, but internally you're admiring the sheer absurdity of this homemade hydraulics lab. The system before you is part bowl, part funnel, part hopeful engineering. The apprentice adjusts the reed slightly and the rhythm shifts. Drip. Pause. Drip. Pause. It's like a sleepy metronome. You could nap right here. You might already be napping, honestly. The early water clocks of Mesopotamia were often just that, bowls with carefully designed holes. Some were meant to be filled and drained. Others were filled gradually by a small inflow like the one you're watching now. Either way, it was about control. Controlling how much water entered, how fast it left, and what those changes meant for the passage of time. And here's the kicker, it wasn't just bowls. In some cases, these timepieces included floating indicators, seeds, petals, bits of cork, that marked levels as water rose or fell. One unearthed design used a hollow copper ball that would sink to the bottom once the water drained. A Mesopotamian ding with no sound. Historians still argue whether the floating marker systems were common or reserved for the scholarly elite. Some suggest they were used in educational settings to teach intervals. Others say they were practical tools for cooks, merchants, and even midwives tracking labor durations. You lean back against the courtyard wall and close your eyes as the apprentice tests another setup. This one involves a perforated spoon suspended above a basin. He fills the spoon with water and it drips slowly through, creating a soft, almost musical patter. It's not exact. It's not even consistent. But it feels like time. And here's a deliciously weird tidbit. Some scholars believe these dripping spoons may have had ceremonial value. One clay inscription mentions a rain spoon used during dry seasons to honor the gods of flood and harvest. Whether it worked is debatable, but it's a charming thought, inviting rain by mimicking its sound. You feel the gentle tug of sleep in the corners of your mind as another apprentice enters the courtyard. This one's older, grumpy, and immediately scolds the younger boy for measuring with the wrong curve. The spoon apparently must have a precise arc to drip correctly. Too flat and the water pools. Too steep and it streams. It's like tuning an instrument, only wetter. Nearby, an elderly scribe chuckles softly from under his reed canopy. They argue about spoons like I used to argue about girls, he says with a wink. At least spoons don't run off with potters. You smile. Even in this world of dripping bowls and solemn rituals, the human touch remains unmistakable. People bicker. People joke. People forget which spoon goes with which basin, and have to start the whole ritual over. And somehow the gods don't smite them for it. As the sun dips lower, the shadows grow longer. You watch the final demonstration of the day, a dual clock setup. 2 bowls, side by side, draining at slightly different rates. One is tuned for daytime rituals, the other for nighttime. They're meant to tell you how far into the day, or night, you are, depending on which bowl finishes first. Except, they're never quite in sync. The right bowl always finishes slightly early, every day. No one can figure out why. Maybe it's cursed, one priest mutters. Another blames the copper. Another, more philosophical, simply says, time prefers the left. You chuckle, but deep down, there's a truth there. These clocks are approximations. They guess, they drip, they try. And somehow, that's enough. The apprentice returns to adjust one last reed. You listen again to the water's slow tap against the clay. The breeze has picked up slightly, rustling through palm fronds and drying laundry. A dog barks once, lazily. Somewhere, someone starts playing a reed flute, its thin melody weaving through the air like a lullaby. You glance at the sky, purple now, streaked with amber, and marvel at how much has passed, not by seconds, not by minutes, but by drips, unhurried, irregular, human. And as another bowl begins to drain in its quiet, patient rhythm, you let your shoulders relax. This is time in its gentlest form. Not shouted, not digitized, just whispered, one drop at a time. You shuffle sleepily into a shaded alley, trying not to trip over a goat that seemed absolutely made itself at home. A few chickens cluck irritably and give you a look as if to say, you're late. Late for what? You're not sure. Because here in Mesopotamia, sleep and wakefulness don't follow the kind of precise schedule you're used to. Instead, time is told in drips, and so are naps. You settle beside a young woman reclining in a courtyard hammock, swaying gently beneath the arch of a fig tree. Her eyes are half closed, and beside her sits a polished bowl with a slow, steady leak. A nap bowl, a literal nap timer. She mumbles something about quarter-drain sleep and dozes off. And that's when you realize Sumerian sleep cycles were strange. There's no concept of a rigid 8-hour rest period. That would have been absurd in a world dictated by changing light, weather, and noisy neighbors. Instead, sleep was fluid, polyphasic, flexible, sometimes dictated by how long it took your water bowl to empty. It wasn't just ritual timekeeping that used clepsydras. People used them to time naps, meditation, and even bath soaks. A common practice involved using a small water clock to signal when a brief rest period was over, especially during scorching afternoons when working was as appealing as cuddling a cactus. Historians still argue whether this informal use of clepsydras for sleep was widespread or elite. Some think only priests and scribes had the time, and clean bowls, to nap by water drip. Others believe the practice was so common, that even children were trained to sleep for half a bowl before chores. You glance at a group of laborers under a canopy, sprawled out on woven mats, each with a small clay bowl nestled in the sand. The rhythm of the drips becomes hypnotic, like a desert lullaby. It's easy to imagine a world where people rose and rested by the flow of water, rather than the shrill tyranny of an alarm clock. And it's not all lounging about. Some of these naps are practical. In large households, servants and cooks use the bowls to ensure they rest just enough between baking shifts or water hauling cycles. One woman, covered in flour from elbow to earlobe, tells you she sleeps for 3 fingers worth of water, then rolls over and lets the bowl do the counting. Even more intriguing is the temple practice of drip vigils. You sneak into a quiet sanctum where a priest lies on a mat, listening to a water clock as it echoes through a narrow chamber. He's not asleep, he's meditating, entering a dreamlike state while tracking the dripping sound. He's been there for hours, or maybe minutes. Time is squishy in here. Some scholars believe these vigils were used for divination, interpreting the rhythm of water drops to receive messages from the divine. Others suggest it was just a very relaxing way to hide from administrative duties. Honestly, either explanation feels valid. You tiptoe out and return to the courtyard, where the young woman in the hammock stirs. Her bowl is empty. Without a word, she sits up, stretches, and walks off to begin what must be her version of afternoon. There's a strange comfort in this slow-paced existence. No loud bells, no blinking clocks, just the gentle whisper of water and the understanding that sleep, like time, doesn't need to be rushed. As you continue wandering, you pass a school courtyard. A small group of children is being taught by a scribe who holds up a tiny, decorated bowl. He explains the concept of a dream count, an old superstition that says the number of drips during a nap determines the number of dreams you'll remember. One boy immediately raises his hand and asks, "What if it drips twice at once?" The teacher frowns, then mutters something about divine interference and changes the subject. You chuckle. Kids haven't changed much, but the idea lingers of a world where dreams are measured, not in REM cycles or smartphone sleep trackers, but in the hollow echo of water on clay. Where nighttime is not a singular block, but a series of quiet pauses, naps, meditations, and slow returns to wakefulness, marked gently by dripping bowls. And that's when it hits you. You have slept like this before. Maybe during a lazy summer afternoon, or while dozing off during a rainstorm counting the drops against your window. It's not foreign, it's ancient, and apparently deeply Mesopotamian. The sun dips low again, casting long shadows across the courtyard tiles. The chickens have vanished. The goat is still there, snoring softly now. You lie down beside a small, half-filled bowl, close your eyes, and count the drips. You're not keeping track. Not really. But the sound calms your thoughts, slows your breathing. Somewhere between the 10th and the 15th drop, you stop trying to measure at all. Because here, in this ancient world of whispering waters and dusty sunsets, sleep isn't something you force. It's something you fall into. One drop at a time. The next morning, you're woken by the sound of tapping. Sharp, rhythmic, and oddly satisfying. You groggily roll toward the noise and find yourself back in the temple courtyard, where a scribe sits hunched over a tablet of fresh clay. He's got a stylus in one hand and an elbow propped up on the edge of a basin. Beside him, a compact water clock, its base stained from years of ceremonial use, and its lip ringed with tiny scratches. Measuring marks, no doubt. The tapping isn't impatience, it's transcription. You scoot closer and see what he's writing. It's not a prayer or a list of barley taxes. It's a manual, a literal step-by-step, cuneiform inscribed guide on how to make and use a water clock. And suddenly it hits you. Mesopotamia didn't just invent ways to measure time, they recorded how they did it. This particular scribe is working from memory and reference notes, chiseling out instructions that read something like, fill the basin to line 3. Observe the drip at mouth width. When quiet, the gods are pleased. It's part instruction, part poetry, part engineering. And yes, cuneiform timekeeping manuals actually existed. Several clay tablets unearthed in digs from Nippur in Babylon contain detailed descriptions of clepsydras, along with annotations that suggest experimentation, variation, and debate. These weren't mystical secrets. They were shared technologies, passed down, refined, and likely discussed over many sleepy afternoons of ritual tea and goat watching. You peer at the tablet more closely and notice something quirky. One set of instructions references a twin basin setup, where a slow-draining bowl is used to refill another, creating a cascade of dripping water. It's a rudimentary attempt at a continuous time cycle, like an ancient version of a battery-powered clock, minus the battery, or the power, or consistency. Historians still argue whether these dual basin systems were common or experimental. Some believe they were used to track longer ceremonies. Others say they were just showpieces, designed to impress visiting officials with Mesopotamian innovation. One particularly cheeky scholar once described them as the lava lamps of their time. Not essential, but very cool. The scribe continues to inscribe his lines with careful precision. Occasionally, he pauses to dip his stylus in water. Not ink. Water. Apparently, slightly moistened clay makes for better etching. You smile at the meta layer, writing about water clocks, using water beside a water clock. It's the kind of slow logic only ancient civilizations and sleepy podcast listeners can truly appreciate. Next to him, a young apprentice watches closely. He has his own small bowl, marked crudely with charcoal lines. Every time the water hits a specific level, he records the time it took to get there. His data is inconsistent. He frowns. Adds another mark. Frowns harder. This is normal, the scribe says gently. The gods enjoy mystery. You're not entirely convinced the gods are involved, but hey, it's a comforting thought. You meander deeper into the records chamber, a shaded room where dozens of clay tablets sit in racks. Each one is a piece of timekeeping knowledge, some record astronomical observations, linking the stars with seasonal water levels. Others seem to be trade logs, bakers noting oven cycles or scribes marking when a shift begins. And here's a curious one. A tablet shaped like a small cone, with concentric rings etched into its face. It's a guide to converting sun time to water time. If it's the second hour after dawn and the sun is here, fill this bowl to that line. It's like a conversion chart. Mesopotamian edition. You realize then just how advanced this culture was. Not just in observing time, but in sharing time. In ensuring that others, even centuries later, could understand the rhythms they once followed. Still, the clepsydras weren't perfect. That much is obvious. You spot another tablet half buried in dust with a scribbled correction. Basin too quick. Replace with thicker clay. It's both comforting and hilarious to know that even in 1800 BCE, people were leaving passive-aggressive notes about poorly functioning office equipment. You head back outside to find a new water clock being tested. This one is different. Rounder, deeper, with etchings that suggest each segment measures a half hour. Or a prayer. Or maybe a snack break? It's unclear. The tester pours water carefully, checks the shadow of a nearby pillar, then nods with satisfaction. Much better than last week's bowl, he says to no one in particular. You sit beside him. He hands you a freshly molded bowl, still damp and sun-warmed. Want to try making your own? He asks. You hesitate. This seems like something that requires math, but you nod. As you shape the wet clay between your hands, smoothing the curve and trying to keep the lip even, you feel connected. Not just to this ancient world, but to the very human need to understand time. To mark it, to shape it, to listen for its passing. And when your bowl is done, lopsided and wobbly but endearingly earnest, You set it beside a dripping jug. Sit cross-legged and wait. 1 drip, 2, 3. Time, it turns out, is something you feel, not just count. The sun hangs heavy in the sky now, painting long shadows across the clay rooftops as the dry breeze dances with palm fronds. You're back at the temple complex again, wandering slowly, feet warm from the sandstone path, when you notice something curious happening near the main altar. A procession of workers carefully carrying buckets. Lots of them. Some are full to the brim, others splash with each careful step, and all of them are headed in the same direction, toward a chamber labeled with the symbol for measured flow. You follow naturally because nothing screams ancient drama like a group of stressed-out priests wrangling sloshing containers. Inside, the chamber hums with quiet tension. There are rows of basins, some ornate and carved, others plain and utilitarian. In the center sits a massive stone trough, dark and slick from centuries of use. This is no mere washing station. This is where time begins, at least in their eyes. See, here's the thing. For water clocks to function, you need water. But not just any water, it has to be clean. Cool, blessed, sometimes even measured before being poured into the measuring bowl. Welcome to the part of timekeeping history they don't teach you in school. The logistics of keeping everything damp. You plop down on a step to watch the chaos unfold. One priest checks the flow rate by dropping a pedal into a trial basin. If it floats too fast to the edge, the water is too agitated. Another adjusts the angle of a clay gutter, trying to redirect a drip to fall just right onto the center of a calibrated bowl. It's part plumbing, part choreography, part obsessive-compulsive dreamscape. And yes, it matters. A lot. Because if the water is too warm, it evaporates faster. Too cold? Flow slows. Too murky? It clogs the hole. Too blessed? Well, now you're dealing with the added pressure of not angering the gods. You're handed a jug by a slightly panicked-looking teenager with sweat on his upper lip and a distinct, I just messed up the offering timing energy. Pour slowly, he begs. Not like yesterday. You nod solemnly and do your best. The jug is heavier than you expect. Inside, the water glimmers, slightly perfumed with crushed herbs, likely part of a purification ritual. It's not just water, it's temporal fuel. Historians still debate how standardized these purification practices were. Some evidence suggests that temples had highly regimented processes involving reed filters, lunar blessings, and even chants designed to settle the flow. Other scholars argue that, much like modern office coffee machines, standards varied wildly depending on who was on duty. Either way, the message is clear. For a water clock to function properly, the water must behave. And that means tending to it with the kind of care normally reserved for royal wine or sacred ink. You help pour the jug into a deep basin, marked with scratched-in symbols denoting morning hours. The water lands with a gentle slosh. A hush falls over the room as everyone watches and waits. The first drip emerges. It's clean, slow, centered, success. A nearby scribe lets out the smallest cheer, quickly hushed by an elder priest with the universal expression of, "This is a sacred moment, child." The scribe shrinks back, whispering apologies. You stifle a laugh. Ancient drama, always entertaining. To your right, a woman in richly dyed robes stirs a bowl with a long stick, testing its depth. She explains that during certain festivals, the water must be measured to specific lines drawn inside the bowl. But these lines wear down, so she re-etches them using a copper stylus and a memory passed down from her grandmother. You ask if she has a written guide. She scoffs. No one trusts the guides. Fair enough. Nearby, someone's water bowl starts draining too fast. A crack is formed near the base. Tiny, almost invisible, but enough to cause an accelerated flow. Panic ensues. The bowl is whisked away, replaced with another. You hear someone mutter, That's the third one this week. You get the feeling someone's about to lose a promotion. And just as things seem to be calming down, a gust of wind slips through the open chamber, rustling the palm leaf shades and cooling the water slightly. The next bowl begins dripping slower. Everyone collectively groans. See, it turns out that in this desert climate, everything conspires against the consistent passage of water. Wind, dust, humidity, uneven clay, bad mood gods, you name it. Which means the people of Mesopotamia spent a lot of time adjusting, recalibrating, and fretting over their wet little clocks. One clever workaround? Covered bowls. Some priests designed lids with tiny holes in the center to protect the water from wind and insects, while still allowing drips to escape. Others took to storing bowls inside narrow corridors with stable temperatures. You even find one priest who keeps his special timing basin in a shaded alcove behind a curtain, guarded like a temple treasure. Historians have long argued whether these elaborate measures were spiritual or scientific. The likely answer? Both. In ancient Mesopotamia, the lines between the two weren't drawn with styluses. They blurred like damp ink on drying clay. As the final bowl finishes its cycle for the day, a chorus of low-toned bells sounds in the distance, signaling the beginning of the evening rites. The water is allowed to rest. Literally. Some bowls are emptied and cleaned, others are covered with linen and tucked away like sleeping children. The temple closes its timekeeping chamber with a final prayer. May the flow return with dawn. You step outside as twilight settles, your fingertips still cool from the jug handle. The wind brushes your face, and somewhere behind you, a single drop lands in a silent bowl. Time, still flowing. Still being coaxed, still beautifully, maddeningly damp. You wake to the faint scent of myrrh in the air and the quiet shuffling of sandals on packed earth. Morning in the temple feels different today. Less formal, more domestic. As you trail behind a row of temple workers setting out tools and water vessels, you notice a small group of women gathering near the lower courtyard. Their robes are simpler, but their presence is confident. They're here on business, and that business is time. You linger near the columns, pretending to be deeply interested in a cracked planter, and watch as one woman, sharp-eyed, sleeves rolled, lifts a beautifully crafted clepsydra from a stone shelf. It's petite, precise, and unmistakably hers. She sets it down, wipes the rim with a linen cloth, and begins her morning check. Drip, catch, count. Then she nods. Satisfied. This isn't just housekeeping, this is authority. What many forget, or were never told, is that Mesopotamia had its share of women who weren't just weaving and tending fires. They were scholars, priestesses, administrators, and, in some cases, keepers of time. Especially in temple contexts, where women often held positions of ritual power, overseeing calendar events, festival timings, and sacred offerings. One tablet even names a high priestess from the city of Sippar, who managed a team of female assistants, each responsible for monitoring the clepsydras tied to lunar rites. Another fragment references the Keeper of the Moon Bowl, believed to be a rotating title held exclusively by women. She would track night segments using a slow drip basin during key seasonal changes. Historians still debate the full scope of these women's influence. Some argue that their roles were ceremonial, figureheads who poured the water and recited prayers. Others point to economic records and temple archives that suggest they were also administrators of agricultural cycles and market schedules. And crucially, their clocks weren't just symbolic, they worked. One of the women in the courtyard approaches a young girl who seems to be training under her. They kneel beside a bowl together, and the elder murmurs, "The first drip must land in silence." You can't help but smile. There's something tender about this tiny ritual, passed down not just by instruction, but by repetition, by muscle memory, by shared stillness. Then a low chuckle draws your attention. An older woman, perhaps a supervisor of sorts, lifts her own clepsydra and says dryly, "If the bowl doesn't drip, you're just staring at water, which is also fine." Laughter bubbles from the group, but it's the kind that comes from comfort, not mockery. You get the sense that this circle of women has been managing the day-to-day tempo of this temple for years, maybe generations. They likely decide when the bread is baked, when the ceremonies begin, when the sun has risen enough to declare a new workday. All according to bowls of water they've learned to read like novels, and not all of them are working within temple walls. Later in the day, you wander through the marketplace, a labyrinth of clay jars, shouting vendors, and the occasional donkey that absolutely does not want to be moved. And you spot a merchant woman carefully adjusting a small bowl behind her stall. It's hidden behind a stack of dyed wool, but visible enough if you're paying attention. She watches it like a hawk. Every few drips, she looks around, then quietly signals to her son to prepare for the lunchtime rush. You see what she's doing? She's timed the flow to estimate the midday crowd surge. It's primitive analytics, Mesopotamian style. One stall down, a woman selling roasted chickpeas explains, without being asked, that she times each batch with a water bowl that holds just enough for 12 minutes of heat. Too short and they're chewy, she warns. Too long and they're ash. You nod solemnly. Burnt chickpeas are no joke. This isn't just clever, it's survival. In a world without timers, calendars pinned to fridges, or chirping phone reminders, water clocks became quiet partners in daily life. Especially for women whose work demanded consistency, but whose time often went unrecorded by official scribes. You pause at a public well where two women are drawing water. One gently sets aside a small, delicate clepsydra, worn smooth at the lip. "It was my mother's," she says. "I learned when to start kneading the dough by watching her bowl." Then she shrugs. "Now it's my bowl. The sky has turned that golden orange that suggests dinner is coming, whether you're ready or not." You stroll back toward the temple, but not before passing by one last scene. A group of girls seated cross-legged around a basin, whispering and giggling. One is trying to guess when the last drop will fall. "Now," she declares. It falls 5 seconds later. They all groan. One of them, bright-eyed and quick-tongued, says, "I'll bet the priestesses already know the trick." Another replies, "Maybe they make the bowl drip faster on purpose." You grin. The seeds of conspiracy and respect have been planted early. As you climb the temple steps once more, the day's rhythm slowing, you feel the weight of centuries of careful observation, of hands cupping water, of women passing down the subtle science of slow time. In the quiet that follows, a final drip lands in the basin behind you. You don't turn to look. You don't need to. You know exactly what time it is. It's late afternoon now, and the usual hum of city life has shifted to something heavier. Marching feet, raised voices, the unmistakable clang of armor plates brushing together like disgruntled brass insects. You follow the sound to the edge of a military encampment just outside the city walls. Tents flap in the wind. Horses stamp the dusty ground. And there, in the center of it all, stands a general in a creased linen tunic, pointing, of all things, at a bowl. You edge closer, expecting maps or weapons. Instead, it's a clepsydra, wider and flatter than the temple types you've seen, with dark symbols etched around its rim. A young soldier crouches beside it, watching intently as a tiny stream of water drips from a suspended jar above. Every drop lands with a delicate plink, echoed only by the rhythmic beat of distant war drums. Wait, are they timing a battle? Indeed they are. You sit cross-legged just behind a tent post, careful to avoid the glare of anyone carrying a spear, and begin to absorb the strangeness of it all. Water clocks on the battlefield, and not for something gentle like campfire songs or laundry cycles. No, these bowls are here to synchronize warfare. Mesopotamian military campaigns, especially in later city-states like Akkad and Babylon, required complex coordination. Without digital watches or synchronized sundials, commanders turned to water clocks to time troop movements, track the duration of ambushes, and even signal the start of assaults. In some cases, runners were dispatched not with written orders, but with bowls, each with a known drip duration. Deliver this when the bowl runs dry, they were told. You watch one such messenger now, cradling a portable clepsydra in a leather pouch. He's got the anxious energy of someone who really doesn't want to mess up the timing. You can't blame him. If he arrives early, a unit might move too soon. If he's late, well, ancient battles weren't known for their generous grace periods. Historians still argue whether these battlefield water clocks were practical or symbolic. Some claim they were used mainly for rituals before battle, timing prayers to Ishtar or Marduk. Others, however, point to military logs that show coordinated troop shifts described in terms of water flow. One scratched clay fragment from a storage room in Nineveh references the third quarter of the draining bowl, a moment when cavalry was to advance. You peek around the tent and catch sight of another clock setup, this one elevated on a pedestal for visibility. A narrow reed feeds water into a hanging bowl, while a soldier monitors the drip rate with visible impatience. Behind him, two junior commanders argue about the speed. "This bowl is cracked," one says. "The gods will see us late." The other rolls his eyes. "Then ask the gods to fix it." The tension is thick but oddly sleepy. The slow pace of water dripping against clay creates an eerie calm amid all the sharp metal and bristling spears. It feels like time is holding its breath, which, in a way, it is. Beside a cluster of tents, you find a different kind of clock in use. A twin bowl setup designed to alert a scout when 2 cycles have passed. The scout lies in the grass, helmet beside him, counting drops instead of sheep. He's marking the window before his next patrol. You ask him how often he has to wake up at night. "Every third bowl," he yawns, unless the stars say otherwise. It turns out water clocks weren't just for day maneuvers. At night, when shadows devour sundials and stars shift too slowly for short intervals, clepsydras became vital tools for maintaining watch rotations. Each guard knew how many drips marked their shift. 1 bowl might represent an hour, 3 bowls, and you could finally sleep, unless you were very unlucky and pulled the first and last shift. Everyone hates that one. You pass a tent where a commander sharpens a bronze dagger and mutters to himself while watching a basin. "If the bowl ends before the messenger returns," he says, "we ride anyway." It's both ominous and oddly procedural. And here's a wonderfully quirky detail. Some generals reportedly named their water clocks. Tablets reference Storm Drip, Lion Bowl, and, charmingly, the one that lies. That last one, you suspect, had some accuracy issues, or maybe a sarcastic soldier with naming privileges. You're surprised by the sense of calm in this camp. Despite the looming prospect of combat, everything moves slowly, evenly, paced by gravity and patience. You sit for a while beside a young soldier tasked with refilling the supply bowls. He wipes his hands, glances at the sky, and sighs. "It's nice," he says, "to have something you can trust when everything else is guesswork." As the sun begins to slide behind the western hills, the tempo of the camp shifts. The final bowls are filling. The messengers are preparing to run. The reed whistles blow, softly like whispers to the wind. And then it begins. 1 bowl empties with a soft gulp, and somewhere beyond the trees, a horn sounds. You don't stay to see the charge. Instead, you lie back in the grass beside the now silent basin, watching the last drops shimmer in the clay curve. No victory horns, no thundering hooves, just the quiet certainty that even war in this world waits for water. It's market day in the city of Ur, and you're weaving through narrow alleyways filled with carts, donkeys, loud bartering, and a suspiciously large number of dates. Somewhere nearby, someone's yelling about pickled onions. Another's singing the praises of their fish stew, possibly louder than the fish would have liked. You stop at a small stall selling linen tunics and notice something peculiar on the counter. A clepsydra. Not the ornate temple kind, Not even the field-hardened battle version. This one's small, slightly chipped, and casually marked with little thumbprints along the inside rim. You tilt your head. Surely this isn't an actual clock? The merchant sees your confusion and grins. For fairness, she says, everyone gets a bowl's worth of bargaining. Ah, now it makes sense. Here, in the chaos of the bazaar, time isn't about prayers or patrols, it's about business. And that, as you soon learn, is a much messier affair. You follow the thread of curiosity across stalls and find more water clocks. Different shapes, different markings, some covered in cloth to keep dust out, others perched beside scales. One fish vendor has his bowl hanging from a rope, dripping above a bucket of eels. You're not sure if it's timing the fish or the sales pitch, but either way, it's effective. Mesopotamian markets weren't standardized in the way modern business hours are. With no synchronized chimes or citywide curfews, besides the occasional decree from a king with control issues, vendors used water clocks to maintain a semblance of structure. Each stall had its own rhythm. One merchant opened for 2 bowls after sunrise. Another stayed until 3 bowls past the midday whistle. A third, selling honey cakes, left when her clepsydra said the flies were winning. You watch as a merchant counts customers with a drip system. Each sale triggers a small pebble dropped into the clock basin, altering the water level in a subtle symbolic form of counting. Later, she'll drain it and tally the pebbles for her end-of-day notes. Primitive, but oddly poetic. But this system isn't foolproof. You stumble across a very animated debate between 2 cloth sellers. One claims the other poured his clock too early, stealing the attention of early customers. Your bowl leaks faster in heat, one shouts. It's not my fault the sun likes me more, the other shoots back. You slink away before it turns into a full-blown tunic-flinging incident. Historians still debate whether this kind of decentralized, analog timekeeping could have ever truly worked. Some argue that the anything-goes nature of clepsydras made markets chaotic. Others believe it added a kind of personal accountability. After all, you can't argue with a drip. Unless you're a fishmonger. Then you probably argue with everything. You pause beside a stall where a quiet man is selling clay bowls, including timekeeping ones. He holds up 2 nearly identical models and explains. This one drains in 20 drops per handspan of sun. This one, 24. It depends how honest you want to be. You blink. Wait, you're saying these clocks aren't calibrated? He shrugs. They're calibrated. To me. And just like that, you realize no 2 water clocks are the same. Every bowl drips at a different pace. Size, shape, hole width, material, all variables. This isn't precision, it's art. And maybe just a little bit of salesmanship. One clever vendor has leaned into the chaos. She offers time-tested discounts, meaning the longer her bowl drips, the better the deal you get. You watch as one man haggles for 3 whole minutes, only to have the bowl drain dry and the vendor laugh. Too slow. Back to full price. He buys it anyway. Everyone claps, and then the real scandal hits. You notice a merchant slipping a small clay disc into the base of his clepsydra. It slows the flow, subtly, just enough to stretch the official market hour. By the time his bowl says the day is half done, the sun's already over the rooftops. Sneaky. You mention it to another vendor who waves dismissively. We call him the time thief of Uruk. He's been doing that for years. He probably thinks no one notices. But they do. This little manipulation of time, for profit, for visibility, for foot traffic, isn't unique. Some vendors drill slightly slanted holes. Others place their clocks on uneven stones to tweak the drip angle. One man sells meat and claims his bowl matches the temple-approved calendar, whatever that means. Spoiler, it doesn't. And yet no one's storming off or lighting stalls on fire. Instead, the vendors adjust. A kind of drippy equilibrium forms where everyone agrees to be roughly wrong together. Nobody trusts the clocks, but everybody uses them anyway. You find yourself smiling. This entire system is built on a foundation of approximated truth, and somehow it works. Time isn't exact here, it's negotiated like everything else in the market. As the sun begins to lower and merchants pack away their goods, the water clocks are drained one by one. Some are scrubbed and stored, others are left upside down to dry. A few, especially the cracked or misbehaving ones, are gently smashed and swept into a pile. Time apparently has a short shelf life. You wander past the emptying stalls and glance at your own shadow. It's longer now, not quite sunset, but close. You find a quiet corner and sit beside a bowl left forgotten on a windowsill. It still has a few drops left to give. And as the last one falls, you realize no two clocks ever matched. And that's okay. Because here, in the land of drips and deals, the passage of time isn't about being precise. It's about belonging to the rhythm. Night has slipped in like a quiet guest, unnoticed until the sky above you is studded with stars, and the lanterns flicker to life along the edges of courtyards and temple doors. You stretch your legs and wander up a narrow staircase you hadn't noticed before. Weathered stone, steep, leading to the upper levels of the great ziggurat. It's cooler here, quieter. The breeze has a soft rustle to it, brushing the edge of your tunic like a whisper. You reach the top, expecting solitude, but someone's already there. A man stands near the edge, wrapped in a dark robe, silhouetted against the sky. He's older, maybe in his 50s, with the kind of stillness that only comes from watching many, many sunrises. At his feet sits a basin, wide, flat, with a metal ring around the lip. And nearby, nestled into a carved stone shelf, a second basin, deeper and narrow, with faint crescent moons etched around the rim. You've found the Night Watcher. He doesn't speak at first, just nods at you and gestures toward the space beside him. You sit. A long silence passes, broken only by the occasional plink of a drop landing in the bowl. Then he says softly, "She's slow tonight." You don't ask who she is, you know. The water, the bowl, time itself. Nighttime keeping in ancient Mesopotamia was its own art. When shadows erased sundials and the market's clocks were long since drained, people turned to what remained. The stars, the moon, and the dripping of water in the dark. And up here, high above the noise of the streets, the echoes of those drops become everything. The man leans forward and dips a thin reed into the full bowl. He explains, barely louder than a whisper, that he uses the sound of the drop, not just the interval. The pitch, the splash, the echo against the stone, all part of the measurement. Some priests in night centuries developed a remarkable auditory sense, trained to know the time not by counting, but by listening. A high splash? Winds picked up. Dull thud? Water levels low? Sharp ping? Full and steady. You try it yourself. You close your eyes and listen to a single drop fall. It lands like a whisper into a deep dream. Another. Then another. You feel your thoughts stretch out between the drips. You breathe slower. Everything narrows into the rhythm of waiting. The watcher gestures to the second bowl, the one with the moon carvings. He tells you this is the echo bowl, used on clouded nights when starlight is faint and moonlight shy. It was placed strategically in a chamber to enhance the acoustics, so the watcher could hear the time pass even when he couldn't see anything. Historians still debate whether these echo bowls were widespread or simply a quirk of certain temples. Some believe they were crafted for sacred rites that took place in complete darkness. Initiation ceremonies, perhaps. Others think they were tools for astronomical observers, charting time between moonrise and set. You lean over the bowl and listen as another drop lands. The sound resonates softly against the chamber walls, like someone tapping a bell from the inside. It's eerie, beautiful, and deeply soothing. The watcher begins muttering a poem, an old verse, half prayer, half lullaby. When moonlight falls and time flows near, each drop a breath the gods can hear. He says it helps keep him awake. Though, honestly, it's had the opposite effect on you. He shows you his notes, etched into a small wax tablet. Just scratchings mostly. Intervals, weather conditions, the occasional doodle of a sheep. You have to make your own calendar up here, he says. The city runs on bowls and bells, but we... He gestures skyward. We run on silence. At one point, he explains a personal theory. That water drips differently depending on the phase of the moon. You ask if he has evidence. He shrugs. Enough to believe, not enough to write down. Classic Mesopotamian logic. You ask if he gets lonely. Sometimes, he replies, but loneliness is quieter than noise, and noise makes the drops harder to hear. And then you hear something unusual. A double drip. 2 drops fall, almost touching. He stiffens. Happens every 7th cycle, he says. Still don't know why. He scratches a quick note. You think of the apprentice from days earlier, frustrated by the unpredictability of his spoon. It's all part of the same truth. Water clocks don't lie, but they do have personalities. As the stars shimmer above, you watch the man rise and refill the bowl from a pitcher shaped like a lion. He does it with reverence, even after all these years. He taps the side twice, listens for a clean drip, and sits back down. It's midnight, he says. You glance around. There's no clock. No sundial. Just the echo of a drop on stone. And yet, you believe him. The wind picks up, carrying the cool scent of distant rain. The man pulls his robe tighter. You do the same. And somewhere behind you, a bowl overflows just slightly. No one notices. Because in this gentle temple of the night, time isn't precise. You find yourself back in the city just as dawn begins to lighten the mud brick skyline. Birds stretch their voices across rooftops, and the first low clatter of carts begins to echo in the still hushed streets. You're wandering aimlessly now, somewhere between the temple and the market, when a whisper of scandal stops you in your tracks. Did you hear? A vendor murmurs to another, their heads leaning close over a stack of woven baskets. The time thief's at it again. You edge closer, ears perked. The time thief of Uruk, a name you first heard half-jokingly in the market, is apparently not just a running joke. He's a problem. A slippery merchant with clever fingers and an obsession with manipulating water clocks for personal gain. You stroll down a side alley and find the accused, a man with an impeccably organized stall, smooth talk, and yes, a prominently displayed clepsydra on his countertop. It looks just like the others. But you've been here long enough now to know the signs. For one thing, his bowl never seems to empty. Despite the heat, despite the full crowd gathered around, the water level holds stubbornly steady, like a camel refusing to kneel. You sidle closer, pretending to examine a bolt of dyed linen, and spot it. A thin layer of oil on top of the water. Invisible at a glance, but perfectly capable of slowing evaporation. You're impressed, also mildly annoyed. Cheating time feels like a violation, even here, in a place where time has always been more interpretive. According to whispers and scraps of clay notes passed between scribes and guards, this man, whose name no one seems to agree on, has adjusted, tampered with, or outright swapped his clepsydra bowls at least 6 times this month. One day it's thicker clay, another a false bottom. Once he even positioned a bowl above a wet patch of stone to fake sacred condensation. Historians still argue whether stories like this are fact or folklore, part urban legend, part social commentary. Some believe the time thief was a real figure, possibly even a group of merchants who shared techniques. Others think it's a Mesopotamian version of a ghost story. Watch your bowl or the time thief will steal your customers. But standing here, watching this man grin like he invented the concept of confidence, you're leaning toward real. He catches you looking, and with the smoothness of someone who definitely has backup bowls hidden under the counter, offers you a sample of rose water. No time like the present, he winks. You don't buy anything. Instead, you wander across the square to a group of older merchants grumbling over cups of diluted date wine. One leans in and says, his clock's always a little behind. Makes customers think the day's still early. They linger. Another snorts. He sells spoiled figs and stale barley. Should have stayed a potter. Turns out the consequences of time fiddling aren't just philosophical, they're economical. If one merchant extends his hours through clock tampering, others lose their edge. It's a ripple effect, and while no one's declared war over it yet, the tension is growing. You hear tell of an unofficial inspection committee, 3 veteran vendors armed with a notch stick, a bronze timer, and decades of grudges. We're watching him, they mutter. One more sticky bowl and we report to the temple. There it is again, the fusion of commerce and ritual. Because in Mesopotamia, the temple isn't just a place of prayer, it's also the keeper of fairness, of weight, of measure, and yes, of time. And if someone's klepsydra isn't playing by the rules, the gods will be informed. Or, at the very least, a particularly cranky priest. You duck into a quieter lane, thinking about what this little scandal reveals. It's not just about cheating customers, it's about trust. About the delicate social contract that makes even a water clock work. Everyone agrees on the fiction together. If one person breaks that fiction, if time can be stretched or shrunk at will, then what even is time anymore? You pause beside a modest shrine where a boy is placing a cup of water in front of a statue. It's not an offering bowl, it's just water, but you notice the tiny hole in the bottom. It's draining slowly toward a carved gutter, and above it, in childlike scrawl, someone scratched a message into the clay. 1 bowl equals enough time to forgive. You smile. Maybe not all time thieves are bad. Later, as the sun rises higher and the day warms to a sleepy boil, you pass the thief's stall again. This time, it's empty. The bowl is gone. A note sits in its place. Gone to get more time. Back soon. You don't know whether to laugh or roll your eyes. You keep walking. And somewhere, in a cool corner of the city, another bowl starts to drip. Because time, no matter how cleverly it's stretched, always finds a way to slip through. You leave behind the chaos of the market and the whispers of water clock deception, heading toward the edge of the city where cultivated fields stretch into the hazy horizon. The clamor of commerce gives way to the gentler, rhythmic sounds of agriculture, hoes striking earth, irrigation channels gurgling, the occasional bray of a donkey deeply unimpressed with its job. You're walking alongside a narrow footpath, bordered on one side by date palms and on the other by tilled rows of barley, when you overhear a familiar debate. Time. Not the ticking clock kind, but the daily kind. The kind that governs when the farmers wake, when they sow and when they decide it's finally okay to eat lunch under the shade of a fig tree. The speakers? A wiry man in sun-stained robes with calloused hands? Definitely a farmer. And a younger man in neatly pressed linen with scrolls tucked under one arm. Temple staff, you'd bet. Possibly a junior priest. They're arguing, politely but with increasing frustration. It's not the 5th interval yet, the priest insists, gesturing toward a small clepsydra mounted on a post. And yet, the farmer replies, gesturing at the actual sun, my shadow says it's too late to plant without roasting. You take a seat on a rock and settle in. This is a classic Mesopotamian showdown. Temple time versus farmer time. See, temple time was formal, divided into intervals, often dictated by clepsydras, calibrated to sacred rituals or celestial events. It served festivals, sacrifices, and ceremonies. It was time with rules, with gravity, both literal and metaphorical. Farmer time, by contrast, was immediate, earthy, dictated by dew, birdsong, muscle memory, and blistered hands. These folks didn't need a bowl to tell them when to sow chickpeas. They listened to the soil. You watch as the priest attempts to make his point by placing a second, smaller water clock on the ground. This one is more accurate, he says proudly. The farmer crouches, inspects the bowl, then says dryly, it's tilted. Touché. Historians still argue how this tension played out in practice. Some believe farmers generally deferred to the temple's calendar when it came to long-term cycles, planting seasons, flood festivals, harvest feasts. But day to day? Most evidence suggests they trusted the sky more than a dripping bowl. Still, the temple tried. You pass a small shed with painted symbols on the door. 3 waves and a barley stalk. Inside is a calendar station, a sort of public clepsydra meant to signal the daily shift changes for both laborers and scribes. Every interval, a boy runs out to bang a small gong. You watch him now, bored, barefoot, gently whacking the gong with just enough effort to not get scolded. A nearby farmer watches the ritual and chuckles. That clock's always fast, or the boy's always lazy. Either way, he shrugs and goes back to work. You visit a neighboring farm where a family has their own version of timekeeping. A large gourd, hollowed out and sealed with pitch, hangs from a beam. A small hole at the bottom lets water drip into a cracked bowl below. The grandmother explains, when the bowl is half full, it's time to rest. When it's dry, time to fetch water. It's practical, tactile. The kids understand it. The goats occasionally drink from it. Another field uses a rock and shadow system. One farmer has set up a standing stone beside his water clock, watching how the shadow hits the clepsydra throughout the day. The water tells me what I already know, he admits. But sometimes it's nice to have company. And while there's a clear divide between temple formality and rural instinct, you notice a surprising amount of crossover. One family invites you to lunch and shows you a clay tablet with both ritual dates and weather markings. They blend temple calendars with moon cycles and seasonal observations, adjusting their habits based on both divine decree and practical need. It's a negotiation, really. Time isn't one absolute truth here. It's a collection of rhythms. Sacred rhythms, solar rhythms, soil rhythms, and sometimes they clash. You hear a final exchange that sums it all up. A younger priest passes a group of women harvesting onions and says, "The festival begins at the 6th drip." One woman, wiping her forehead, replies, "We'll arrive at the 7th, after we finish the actual work." You wander a little farther and come across a unique hybrid, a farming cooperative that's actually tried to merge clepsydras with local weather signs. They have a board where someone logs the water drip intervals beside notes like, "Pigeons didn't sing today," or "Soil too stubborn. Delay planting." It's oddly charming and kind of genius. As the afternoon slides toward evening and long golden shadows return, you find a flat stone to sit on, watching a farmer finish his final rows. He checks his clepsydra, one he carved himself, and turns it over without even glancing. It's not empty yet, but he's done for the day. Because in the end, it's not the bowl that tells him what time it is. It's the sunburn on his shoulders. You wake to the scent of spice wafting from the east side of the city, where traders from Babylon have set up camp with their carts, their silk-wrapped packages, and their polished words. The bustle here feels different, faster, more layered. The conversations are peppered with foreign accents, borrowed phrases, and the unmistakable sound of contracts being bartered in at least 3 languages at once. You follow the noise and soon find yourself at the foot of a tall, brightly painted wooden structure. It's not a shrine, not quite a shop. At first glance it looks like a sculpture, but then you spot the bowl. Actually several bowls. They're arranged in tiers, small to large, top to bottom. Each one connected to the next by a thin carved channel. It's a cascading water clock, Babylon style, and it's gurgling with a satisfying, precise rhythm that would make a temple priest weep with envy. This, you learn, is a new model. Imported, polished, calibrated. Marketed as self-regulating, which is a bold claim, even by Mesopotamian standards. And, as the trader enthusiastically explains, this new design doesn't just mark time, it standardizes it. Which in theory means one thing. Everyone tells the same time. Or at least more of the same time than usual. You blink. Could it be? The dream of synchronization in a world where no two clocks ever agreed? Apparently, Babylon has been trying. In the increasingly interconnected network of Mesopotamian city-states, trade caravans and temple alliances made synchronized time more valuable than ever. Merchants wanted to leave and arrive at designated hours. Priests needed festivals to align. Messengers couldn't keep blaming sandstorms forever. So Babylon, with its growing obsession for systems and ledgers and geometry, attempted what no one else dared, a time standard. Historians still argue whether this standardization really stuck. Some records suggest a few temples agreed on shared interval lengths. Others claim the whole thing was chaos wrapped in clay. Either way, you can feel the ambition here. You watch as a man tests one of the newer models. It's made from black burnished clay with etched intervals filled in with powdered copper. He adjusts a tiny reed valve, checks the shadow cast by a fixed pin, and murmurs, "Perfect alignment." A woman nearby disagrees. "Too fast. Your last bowl ended 3 drips early." She's not alone. In the corner of the courtyard, a cluster of older priests is whispering urgently. One gestures wildly at the new clock, clearly not a fan. "It mocks the flow," he grumbles. "Time is sacred, not measured." "Ah, yes. The old guard?" You smile amicably because this, more than anything, feels timeless. The dance between tradition and innovation. One side wanting to preserve the quiet chaos of their ancestors. The other hoping to tighten it all into something cleaner, more predictable, more efficient. One young scribe shows you his imported clepsydra, a sleek cylinder with internal lines denoting 12 precise intervals. Babylon now uses these to track star positions, he explains. We can even predict eclipse timing. You raise an eyebrow. Sometimes, he amends, then blushes. The benefits are clear, though. Caravan leaders use these new clocks to coordinate departure times between cities. One trader brags that he traveled from Larsa to Nippur using the same water clock model the entire way. You ask if it worked. He shrugs. Well, we were only a little late. Still, others aren't convinced. A potter with hands stained deep red says, "These new clocks don't feel right. Too cold, too quiet." He gestures to his personal clepsydra, a wide bowl with hand-painted spirals and a wonky base. This one's been dripping since my father's father shaped it. Never needed an update, you get it. The shift isn't just mechanical, it's emotional. You find yourself seated beside a small girl helping her grandfather sand the edge of one of these new Babylonian bowls. She asks if he likes the changes. He pauses. "I like when the bowls don't leak," then adds, "But I miss when we made time instead of measuring it." That night, you attend a demonstration in the town square. A Babylonian engineer with elaborate tattoos and an assistant carrying diagrams presents a new type of clepsydra that claims to maintain accurate flow in all weather. He pours the water, adjusts a tiny mechanism, and steps back dramatically. It works for 6 drips. Then the wind picks up, and a gust topples a fig cart into the basin. Everyone groans. One woman whispers, "The gods still decide." And maybe that's the truth of it. No matter how precise, how engineered, how Babylonian a water clock becomes, there's always wind, always sand, always an echo bowl somewhere on a rooftop whispering that time can't be owned. You fall asleep that evening beneath the stars, lying beside a half-buried bowl that once belonged to a wandering astrologer. You imagine him calculating star rise while listening to a drip that may or may not match the priest's version of fourth interval. You close your eyes to the sound of a new drop, falling onto an old stone. And time, once again, refuses to choose sides. The morning air is thick with dust and bureaucracy. You're inside a long, dim hall near the administrative district of the city. A place that smells faintly of clay, ink, and the deep sighs of overworked scribes. Here, where ledgers are carved instead of scribbled, time doesn't just drift by in droplets. it gets audited. You approach a low desk where a man with ink-stained fingertips is carefully balancing two things: a water clock and a tax tablet. Behind him, shelves of clay records stretch toward the ceiling, each labeled with meticulous cuneiform notations. He doesn't look up when you arrive. He's too busy watching a single drop of water fall into a copper basin. "This bowl," he mutters, "tells me how much barley you owe." You blink. Welcome to Mesopotamian time-based taxation. Turns out clepsydras weren't limited to temples or markets. They had a life in the bureaucratic heart of the city too, used in record-keeping, court proceedings, and yes, measuring the taxable flow of labor and harvest yields. Because when someone brings in their offering late, or claims they worked longer than they did, there's only one impartial witness available: water. You sit quietly and observe as another clerk brings forward a modest bowl of grain. The scribe nods, checks the flow on his water clock, and compares it to a row of previous entries. "This is 2 drips short," he says without judgment. Just fact. The farmer shrugs. Wind blew the cart over. The scribe carves a note. "Next season, adjust for wind." In a side chamber, you find a priestess quietly recording temple tithes. Her clepsydra is wide and shallow, set next to a list of donation intervals. A person offers oil. She begins the drip. Once it empties, she seals the donation period and records the total. "The gods accept punctuality," she tells you, "but they understand delays." She winks, and still the clock ticks. Well, drips. Some officials go further. You pass a hearing in progress. 2 men disputing the boundaries of a date grove. They speak over one another until the magistrate raises a hand and points to the clepsydra on the bench. 1 bowl, each. The first man talks fast. The second man slower, more deliberate. But as the final drop falls, so does the gavel. Actually a rounded stone, but you get the point. The magistrate nods. Time is fair. Historians still argue whether these time allocations were rigid or symbolic. Some say clepsydras were just visual aids, meant to impose a psychological sense of urgency. Others point to legal tablets that reference the duration of a bowl as a formal metric for speaking time, punishment length, and even negotiation cooldowns. You climb a short staircase into a lofted archive room and find rows of tiny bowls, each with a label: tax hearing, grain quota, market appeal. These weren't general-purpose clocks. They were task-specific, like having different timers for different chores. One scribe lets you hold his favorite audit bowl, a delicate piece with 4 evenly spaced notches inside. 1 notch per debtor, he explains. They talk until the water hits their line. After that, no more excuses. You glance at his current records, dozens of clay receipts, each one marked with a stamp indicating the time of submission. Late entries, he says. Owe more barley. Of course they do. In one of the temple offices, a younger assistant is grumbling about the new Babylonian clocks being implemented for tax stations. They drip too fast, he mutters. We'll end up charging double without realizing. You sense an audit disaster brewing. Later, you observe a small crowd gathered near a public register. A large clepsydra is on display, slowly draining. A man beside it reads aloud from a tablet, calling out names. People step forward and offer their goods. Each time, the man nods, makes a mark, and lets the water run. When the bowl drains, he stops. We'll finish tomorrow. One woman protests. I've waited all morning. He points to the bowl. You should have arrived before the 5th drip. She storms off. The bowl, entirely indifferent, drips again. It's a strange thing how such a gentle, passive instrument can be used for such strict decisions. But that's the duality of Mesopotamian time. It's both whisper and decree. A drop is soft, but if it falls late, it costs you. And perhaps no moment captures that better than when you find an abandoned tablet near a window, half covered in dust. On it, someone carved a short phrase: "Time owes no one." You pause. Read it again. Then, just as the next drip lands in a nearby basin, the wind picks up, scattering a puff of dust across the floor. You turn toward the courtyard, where another clock waits. This one's clean. Ready? And slowly, inevitably, it begins to empty. The city winds down in tones of warm clay and soft sandals as evening draws near. You wander through the lower residential quarter now, where children dart between reed houses and the scent of lentils and roasting onions drifts lazily in the air. People are laughing, arguing softly, sweeping thresholds and calling each other home. Not by hour, but by feeling. The light fades. The shadows stretch. It's almost time for dinner. You pass a quiet family courtyard where an elderly man is seated on a woven mat, cradling a rounded bowl in his lap. The children around him lean in close, watching intently as he tips a clay jug into the basin with practiced ease. The water settles and he places a seed, possibly a fig, on the surface. He smiles at the children. When it touches the bottom, you must go to bed. A bedtime bowl. Your heart softens. It's not precise. It doesn't need to be. It's just a ritual. A way to ease into the night gently, with the slow slide of time marked not by alarms, but by floating fruit. And then, as the children quiet down, he begins to speak. Not a prayer, not a rule, but a story. A story about the first water clock, made from a tortoise shell. A gift from the gods to a forgetful farmer who never woke in time for harvest. About how the gods poured time into a bowl so he could see it, hear it, and one day pass it on. You've heard versions of this tale before. Maybe not with tortoise shells, maybe not with farmers, but the theme is always the same. Time is a gift, but only if you listen to it. That's what these bowls were, after all. Not just tools. Not just curiosities. They were conversations between people and the passing of the day. And unlike bells or buzzers, the clepsydra asked nothing of you. It didn't rush. It didn't chime. It didn't glare from your wrist and ask why you were still lying down. It just dripped. And in that drip, you begin to understand what this whole journey has really been about. Yes, water clocks measured rituals. They timed naps and taxes and battles. They fought the sun and told stories to stars. But more than anything, they created moments. Little anchors in the river of experience. You remember the apprentice fumbling with spoons, the priest watching stars between drops, the children trying to guess the moment the water would vanish. You remember bowls carved with moons, bowls etched with barley lines, bowls patched and repurposed and handed down like family secrets. You remember that none of them matched. That was never the point. Time in Mesopotamia was allowed to breathe. It flexed. It warped. It followed the flow of water, not the tyranny of ticking. It encouraged people to wait, to wonder, to nap, to adjust. It invited imperfection. It allowed pause. And you, tired now, dust clinging to your sleeves, the voices of children fading behind you, find a step and sit. The city is settling into itself. The last bowls of the day are being poured, not to measure, but to mark. The way candles are lit, or lullabies are hummed, or tea is poured without urgency. A bowl nearby, forgotten on a low wall, lets out one last drip. And now, the night has fully arrived, and with it, the final hush of the Mesopotamian world. The sky above you is velvet dark, the stars flickering like embers on still water. No one is rushing now. No one is counting. Even the clocks, the bowls, the spoons, the reeds have gone quiet. Their duty done for the day. The city rests. And so do you. You stretch out slowly on a cushion of woven straw, the scent of warm earth rising beneath you. Your breathing matches the memory of the drips, the soft, even rhythm that guided you through temples and markets, fields and courts, rooftops and kitchens. A rhythm that never hurried you, never startled you. It simply was. As your thoughts soften and blur, you realize how rare it is to live by such a gentle tempo. One that forgives lateness, accepts early endings, and lets you sit in silence without guilt. The last thing you remember is the feel of smooth clay beneath your fingers, and the faint echo of water finding its path downward. Not to warn you, not to wake you, but to say, you are here now, and that's enough. Let the rest drip away. Sleep well. End of script. Sweet dreams.